Hello and welcome, dear friends of gartenschlau.com. Today we're talking about the topic of oleander. Oleander is a very beautiful topic. It's getting colder at night. That means you need to think about whether you want to start bringing the plants inside. It may only be mid-September now, but in October the storms could well be stronger. Frosts are coming. You have to wait and see. The year has been super hot, but we can't really assess the rest of it yet. How do I prepare an oleander? What do I need to consider with oleander? How can I propagate an oleander vegetatively? I'm going to try to give you a brief overview of this in this video, and I will explain the details in more depth in future videos. Here you see a beautiful oleander. Next to it you can see my plumeria, which has bloomed beautifully this year. Both of these plants belong to the family of dogbane and are therefore relatively similar in their care. The only difference compared to plumeria is that an oleander can stay outside during the warm season. So, as soon as you put it outside and there are no late frosts anymore, provided that you even leave it outside the whole winter, if there are none at all. If you have late frosts and live in a wine-growing region where the conditions are really great, then you can practically leave it outside the whole year. You can leave it outside, even theoretically planted in the garden. If you have it in a pot, then you can even place it in a water bowl, like in a saucer, and keep it filled with water. An oleander loves that, but that's basically the basic requirement for it to develop properly, to always be in good health, and to be able to put in full energy. And that's also very, very important when it comes to fertilizer. It needs a complete fertilizer, a really strong one, so that it can take in a lot of nutrients. And then, of course, it's also crucial. It needs a lime-rich soil. If it's not a substrate that has a lot of lime in it, then you need to make sure of that it's about the fertilizer supply. That's realized. Yes. That's basically the basic requirement for a good development of an oleander. It's also important for an oleander to be pruned properly, so that it takes on a nice shape with us and doesn't get all bushy, as it is with some plants. I've already pruned the plant several times. When it comes to pruning, it's important that when you cut it back radically, the likelihood of it blooming in the following year is very, very low. That means you cut it back very hard, and it will definitely, or very likely not, bloom. An alternative would be that after you've pruned it, you make cuttings from the trimmings. That's relatively easy. A cutting also roots very quickly. A few cuttings you can see here, they have rooted relatively recently. This is the variety. Alsace. Alsace is a pure white bloom. Here is the already rooted cutting of this variety. Here we can take a look. In the pot. There aren't that many roots yet. Here you can see a few little roots, but this is definitely a successfully rooted plant. It's already sprouting nicely. Here, this one has been in the pot for a while, since spring, and here we will definitely see more roots. Exactly, here we see these yellowish white roots, and this is the method if you have an oleander of which you might only have one plant. That what you've pruned, provided it's young, correspondingly retains its bloom. And then the plant that has been pruned, it will sprout more vigorously in the following year and will bloom accordingly. Now here's another tip about this oleander. Let's see. The bloom has come out on the new shoot. This is it now. The first bloom from this shoot, if it's blooming now in spring, therefore in late spring or early summer, and then starting to fade, the likelihood is definitely very high that you get a second bloom in the fall from the same flower shoot. That's why it's important not to cut off the first bloom, unless the flower shoot is completely dried up. So, should you cut it or can you cut it? And that's actually the trick. You can get two blooms. If you've cut off the first bloom after it has faded and you think, oh, am I doing something good for the plant? It's bad if you cut them out because then it won't bloom. Let's talk about pruning. It's important to remove all these old things here. For those wondering why there are a few shoots sticking out here, these are not things that have sprouted from the roots, but I just stuck in 1 or 2 cuttings. If you look at the cuttings now, there are scale insects on here. Scale insects are annoying pests because they are relatively hard to get rid of. It's actually quite easy with systemic agents. You would have to completely poison the plant. If you want to avoid that, and the plant generally looks relatively pest-free, you can also achieve that through pruning. If you don't want to use chemical plant protection, you can of course use mechanical plant protection and cut out everything that is sick. What's important in all of this is that you especially remove dried up branches. Remove the branches. The plant doesn't need that. Then there are some drives that didn't develop that way. As you wish, you definitely have to pay attention, like with any pruning of the plant, that you maintain a certain basic shape. Let's say it stays. What's important when pruning oleanders is that if you're very, very sensitive, the sap that the oleander exudes or drips out is relatively aggressive and can cause very strong skin irritations. Bring forth, and of course it shouldn't get in your eye. Otherwise, it can get in your eye. What's important, as I said, is a very strong pruning. Everything you cut back should ensure that the plant will sprout very strongly the following year, building itself up better because of that. And in the following year, it will grow beautifully again thanks to this nice structure, and then it will bloom properly. It brings many flowers. And as I said, if someone is thinking, oh, that's a shame, it's blooming right now, you can definitely put it in a vase. It will probably root there, and then you can replant it accordingly. So you cut off dried branches. I had this bush because it was very sprawling, fixed with a string. You can actually remove them now. You can see it's holding its shape quite well now. Everything that has very thin spindly shoots, those are all things that take energy away from the plant. Ideally, you always cut above a node. It's similar to figs. You can see here the internode is also very, very long. You should mostly not keep that because it should grow compact. That means I cut above this node. You could easily root this shoot now. Then I look here, where do I have the node? It's right here. You can also do it staggered, cut. In the end, it just needs to be compact. So thin shoots off. Now I'm going to speed up the video. Thank you much. So it looks very, very drastic now. If you look at the plant now, I left that on purpose. These light green shoots, these are the shoots that are now called after this long summer break, when it got a bit cooler, started to sprout. And of course they need to go. The plant doesn't need that. Then everything that is dried out is where oleander cancer or pests are involved. You cut that back accordingly. And then the plant is already prepared for its winter quarters. That's where you place them. Cool. And so cool and not too dark. Now there are no leaves at all. That means the plant isn't doing any photosynthesis at all. How is that supposed to work? No leaves. That's why it can stay relatively dark. Ideally, there should be a window. So where it's a bit bright, that's always the ideal condition for plants to overwinter. Then they also have a good orientation, how it is determined by the sun and brightness, and definitely very cool. Why did I put a plumeria here? It's actually quite simple. You can see there's also a flower shoot here, and you can even tell, maybe, there are still active flower buds present, depending on how the weather behaves now or whether I bring the plant inside. These flowers can naturally continue to grow. The only problem what we have with plumerias as soon as we bring them inside from outside. Then we quickly have a spider mite infestation. And spider mite infestations on plumeria are a very, very annoying thing. For that reason, as soon as you use a spray, at least that's the experience I've had, no matter what I put on the plant. That is of chemical origin, something you just don't recognize, in the form of nutrients or something like that when you apply a treatment. She's dropping all the leaves and flowers off. If that's the case for you, feel free to write it in the comments. If you have any questions or suggestions about oleander, you can also write that in the comments. As I said, propagation is super easy. You can simply take these shoots. Theoretically, you can just stick them directly into the soil or put them in a glass of water. Then they will root very, very quickly. And then you have these little mini oleanders that you can either keep because you now, or keep it with the bud so that it blooms nicely. That you still know what color it is, or you can also prune the plant accordingly. You have to keep in mind that when you prune a cutting, then it doesn't invest as much energy in the flowers anymore, but more in root growth. And it becomes stronger because of that. Yes, so that was it on the topic. Oleander, pruning, cultivation, care, etc. Relatively compact. I would say until next time.